My name is Sarah Parker. I'm a 40-year-old woman, working part-time, and doing my best to keep everything running smoothly at home. Life hasn't turned out exactly how I imagined it would when I married my husband, Mark. We don't have children, but our relationship is solid. Stronger even since we moved in with his mother, Helen, 2 years ago. I wasn't exactly thrilled about the idea at first. Living with in-laws is something you hear stories about, and not always the good kind. But I love Mark. He's kind, caring, and incredibly hardworking. When he suggested we move in with his mom to help her out after his dad passed away, I agreed. It was the right thing to do. Helen wasn't old enough to need care, but the house was too big for her to manage on her own, and Mark felt responsible. At first, everything seemed fine. Mark and I settled into a routine. He worked long hours, and I took on more responsibilities at home. Helen mostly kept to herself. She'd spend her days out with friends or gardening in the yard, and I thought, well, maybe this won't be so bad after all. But things changed, and not for the better. It started small. Helen would make comments here and there, little jabs that didn't seem like much at first. "Sarah, you're looking tired," she'd say as I passed her in the hallway. Or, "You really should take better care of your appearance." It was strange because Mark never seemed to notice. He'd come home, exhausted from work, and she'd greet him with a warm smile, acting like the perfect mother. But when he wasn't around, her tone would change. One day, I was relaxing in the living room after a long day of cleaning. My feet were up, and I was enjoying a rare moment of peace. Helen walked in, glanced at me, then at my socks. "Sarah," she said, her voice sharp, "you've got a hole in your sock." I looked down, and sure enough, there was a small tear. Embarrassed, I quickly pulled the socks off and muttered something about needing to throw them away. But Helen wasn't done. "Wearing torn socks?" She laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "What kind of family did you come from? Or do you not have enough money to buy new socks?" I didn't know what to say. It was such a strange thing to comment on, but it stung all the same. She wasn't just talking about my socks. She was mocking me, making me feel small in a house that wasn't mine, and it was becoming clear that this was her real way of communicating with me, through backhanded comments and passive-aggressive digs. I wanted to tell Mark, but I hesitated. He already had so much on his plate, and what was I supposed to say? That his mother didn't like me? That she was being mean? I felt like a child even thinking about it, so I let it go. Maybe I thought I was just overreacting. Maybe it would pass. But it didn't. Helen's comments became more frequent, especially when her daughter Jane came to visit. Jane would stop by almost every weekend. She had a way of walking into the house like she owned the place, her eyes always scanning the room as if looking for something out of place. And when she found something, she'd pounce. One Sunday afternoon, I was preparing dinner when Jane arrived. She strolled into the kitchen, sniffing the air like she was judging a 5-star restaurant. "Sarah," she said, lifting the lid off the pot. "What is this? Doesn't your stew taste awful?" Caught off guard, I tried to explain. "I think it's fine," I said, tasting it myself. It seemed normal to me. "I'm not asking what you think," Jane snapped, pulling the pot from the stove. "If I say it's bad, it's bad." Before I could react, she marched to the sink and dumped the entire pot down the drain. I stood there, speechless, as the dinner I had been preparing all afternoon disappeared before my eyes. "What are you doing?" I finally managed to ask, my voice shaking. "That was for dinner." Jane turned to me with a smirk. "Consider it a favor. You're lucky I'm here to keep this family from eating your terrible cooking. Mark doesn't need to get sick because of you." My hands clenched into fists at my sides, but I bit my tongue. Yelling at Jane wouldn't solve anything. I knew how it would go. Helen would come to Jane's defense, and somehow I'd be the one in the wrong. So I stayed silent, swallowing the anger that rose in my chest. Helen, of course, said nothing. She watched the whole thing unfold from the kitchen doorway, her arms crossed, a satisfied look on her face. I wanted to scream. But what good would that do? I was living in their house, and it felt like every day they reminded me of that fact. And yet, despite everything, I still didn't tell Mark. He worked so hard, and I didn't want to burden him with more stress. I kept telling myself that I could handle it. I could live with Helen's jabs and Jane's insults. They were just words after all. But deep down, I knew this wasn't sustainable. Then things took an unexpected turn. One afternoon, the doorbell rang. I was in the middle of cleaning, and Helen was in the living room watching TV. When I opened the door, I was greeted by a team of movers. "Hello, ma'am," one of the movers said politely. "We're here to deliver some items." I blinked, confused. Movers? We didn't order anything. But before I could say anything else, they started bringing boxes into the house. I quickly looked at the delivery slip, and my heart skipped a beat. The sender's name was right there in bold letters, Jane. "Wait, stop," I called to the movers. "This isn't right. You've made a mistake." One of the movers pointed at the delivery slip. "It's addressed to this house." Panicking, I rushed into the living room to confront Helen. "What's going on? Is Jane moving in?" Helen didn't even bother looking up from the TV. "Oh, I forgot to tell you. Yes, Jane's moving in. She got divorced and needs a place to stay." I stood there in shock. "What? Why didn't you tell us?" Helen shrugged. "I didn't think it was important." Not important? Jane was moving into our house and Helen didn't think it was worth mentioning? My heart raced as I tried to wrap my head around it. Where was Jane supposed to stay? There wasn't enough room for all of us. Before I could ask more questions, Jane herself walked through the front door, directing the movers like she owned the place. "What's going on?" I demanded. "You didn't tell us you were moving in." Jane smirked. "Well, I'm telling you now, and since there aren't enough rooms, I'll be taking yours." The air seemed to thicken around me as her words sank in. "Your what?" "You heard me," Jane said, walking past me and into the hallway. "You and Mark can find somewhere else to live. You're not needed here anymore." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. This was it. After months of biting my tongue, after enduring their insults and cold behavior, they were finally kicking us out. And for what? So Jane could have the house to herself? Anger boiled up inside me, but I kept my voice steady. "We'll see about that," I said, walking out of the house. My hands trembled as I dialed Mark's number. "Hello?" Mark's voice came through the phone. "Mark," I said, my voice tight. "It's time to put our plan into action." 3 months passed. 3 months of tense silence from Helen and Jane. They must have thought they had won when Mark and I packed our things and left. But they had no idea what was coming. Mark and I had moved into a beautiful high-rise apartment in the city. It was everything we had dreamed of. Spacious, modern, and far from the toxicity of his family. For the first time in what felt like years, we were at peace. But that peace didn't last long. One Saturday morning, as Mark and I were enjoying breakfast, his phone rang. The name on the screen made my stomach tighten. Jane. Mark answered the call, his face unreadable. "Hello?" "Mark!" Jane's voice screeched through the phone, loud enough that I could hear every word. "The bank account is empty. What did you do?" Mark leaned back in his chair, his expression calm. "What are you talking about, Jane?" "Mom's money is gone," she yelled. "Did you steal it? Did you take her money while you were living here?" I exchanged a look with Mark. So this was it. The moment we had been waiting for. "Jane," Mark said slowly, "I didn't take anything. Mom spent the money herself." "What?" Jane's voice wavered. "That's impossible. There was plenty of money left after Dad passed away." Mark shook his head. "No, there wasn't. Mom spent it all on herself. The inheritance was divided when Dad passed. You got most of the financial assets, remember? Mom only had the house and some savings. But there should have been more," Jane stammered. "There wasn't," Mark replied firmly. "And now that we're gone, it's up to you to handle everything." The realization hit Jane like a ton of bricks. Helen had spent most of the money, and what little was left had been used up in the months after we moved out. Jane had thought she was securing a future by moving into the family home. But now she was stuck with a house that came with its own financial burdens, property taxes, utilities, and upkeep. I took the phone from Mark. "Maybe you should sell the house," I suggested calmly. "It's worth a lot. You could get enough money to live on for a while." "What?" Jane's voice was shaky. Sell the house? Where would we live? I smiled to myself, picturing Jane's face on the other end of the line. That's not our problem anymore. You wanted us gone, and now you've got what you wanted. Enjoy it. Helen and Jane learned the hard way that money doesn't last forever, and now they were left to deal with the consequences of their actions. Mark and I, on the other hand, had moved on. We no longer had to worry about the toxic environment we had left behind. As I stood on the balcony of our new apartment, watching the city skyline light up the evening sky, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. We were free. Free from the manipulation, the insults, and the drama that had consumed our lives for far too long. Mark joined me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. I leaned into him, feeling the weight of everything lift from my shoulders. "I'm better than okay," I said, smiling. We finally got what we deserve, a life of peace. And that was all I had ever wanted.